Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday webinar. I am Paul, the founder of Everymind at Work, and I'm also joined by our head of HR, Zoe Parker. Before we start, because I think there's been a bit of technical issues that me and Zoe are facing. I don't know whether it's my internet or Zoe's internet. Can we just confirm, guys, you should see a chat box to the right-hand side. Can you hear us okay? If you can let us know that you can hear us, just say yes in the chat box. That'd be great.
And me too. That's great.
Good stuff. So excellent. Kate, Krishna, Samantha, Neil, Kelly, Corey, Catherine, Sandra, Gemma, Gillian, Taylor, Nancy, Laura, Annabelle, and Michael. Good stuff. And Rachel. So guys, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us on this webinar today. It definitely seems like a popular topic. I know I've had a couple of people ask us to do a session on it, and we are going to be talking about it in more detail together. Lindsay's with Graham and Teresa as well. Good to see you all, guys. So I'm just going to share my slides, and hopefully you're going to be able to see them in a minute. But as you can see, the topic for today's webinar is dealing with imposter syndrome, and me and Zoe are going to probably share our own personal experiences on this session as well. But as always, if you've joined these webinars before, it's important for us, if you do want to get engaged and involved, then please do use the comment section below as well. So in terms of imposter syndrome, you know, if you've ever felt like you don't belong or you felt like you're not worthy of the position that you're in, we're obviously going to be addressing the causes of imposter syndrome today and talk about how to manage it. We're going to be looking at the 5 different types of people as well, and personalities when it comes to feeling like an imposter. But again, just to kind of give you a bit of a recap, I'm Paul, the founder of Everymind at Work, and I share my own personal experience of mental health and how that impacted me. And I'm joined by Zoe. Zoe, just want to give a little bit of a backstory?
Hi, yeah, my name is Zoe, and I've got, about 20 plus years experience now in HR, various roles in various sectors. So I joined Everymind a couple of months ago, but my background is purely HR generalist. So yeah, that's me.
Zoe's the expert.
I don't know.
So in terms of imposter syndrome, before we kick it off, just to get some kind of engagement, and Zoe, I want you to share your thoughts on this as well. HR professionals, business leaders, it seems like imposter syndrome is something that, you know, people do struggle with. So if you feel like you have struggled with imposter syndrome in the past, just put a yes in the chat box and let us know. But Zoe, have you ever experienced this as a HR professional?
Yeah, personally, absolutely. Yeah, and I'll share which type I think I am later. Yeah, very much so throughout my career, and experienced seeing it with friends, colleagues. I think it's so widespread, and we probably don't even realize it. And you may not necessarily label it, but when you hear about the types of things that you see and hear, you think, gosh, yes, that's me. And it seems to have sort of a predisposition to women as well, which, you know, all the sort of research suggests that. You know, probably think of some reasons why, but I don't want to be don't want to be giving those away just yet. But yeah, definitely, I think it's a very, very popular topic. I think that a lot of people have experienced.
Yeah, and it looks that way from everyone saying yes in the chat box as well. So yeah, even when, you know, Zoe sent me the information for today, and obviously we've done some content within the Everymind app itself on in imposter syndrome, and I also spoken to our head of psychology, Lauren Callahan, before this call. And as I was going through all of the content that we're going to be sharing with you today, guys, I was like, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people being able to relate to a lot of the of what we talk about today. So in terms of imposter syndrome and what do we mean by imposter syndrome, it really is believing that you're not as competent as others perceive you to be. Sometimes it's feeling like a fraud, as one day you're going to be found out. Sometimes, you know, we believe that it's luck that got you where you are today and you don't really belong here. So, you know, right place, right time. I've known a lot of business leaders as well who always say, oh, it was luck. You know, it was luck why I got here today. And, you know, yes, luck might play a part in it, but, you know, it's not all luck. And it's generally linked to being fearful of success, of failure, of rejection, and of exposure as well. And I think that fear of rejection is really key. at this point as well. And in terms of what do people experience when dealing with imposter syndrome, it's chronic self-doubt, which can lead to anxiety. It's an unrealistic view of their self-worth, their skills, their experience. It's believing that their success can be attributed to other factors. Overly critical of work, compensating by overachieving or over-delivering or over-preparing, which, I'm sure we all do. And feeling disappointed when unrealistic goals are not achieved. I definitely can relate to that overly critical of your own work. And there's definitely a personality type, which we're going to be talking about in just a minute, which falls heavily into that as well. But in terms of, if you're unsure whether this applies to you, there's a couple of things that you can ask yourself. And I think, the first one is, do you get upset and agonize over mistakes and overthink the scenarios? So would you say this is something that you do?
God, yeah, all the time. I mean, I think I've shared before on these webinars, I'm a bit of a natural worrier anyway. So I need to really work hard at this, and I need to sort of practice what I preach and really think about what I'm doing, because I'm exceptionally self-critical, and I overanalyze as well. So if something goes wrong, I'd be thinking, gosh, why has it gone wrong? Did I not prepare well enough, or did I not know enough information? Or absolutely, it's I think it's one of the classic traits, isn't it, that you sort of blame yourself and overthink the situation. I think the whole, obviously we can talk about this leading to anxiety, but I think this is a big part of it, isn't it? And that sort of anxiety, overthinking, procrastinating, catastrophizing, whatever it might be. But I think they're all linked to sort of this type of scenario, definitely.
Yeah, and I think like the biggest and longest argument that we all have is with ourselves, right? It's about our mind. Our mind is always there arguing with us, and it's that kind of person that sits on our shoulder all the time and tells us a lot. And it's something that we obviously need to manage and monitor, and which is what we're trying to do at Everymind, of course.
Yeah.
It's, do you believe your success is due to something or someone else? Again, that's a question that sometimes we have to ask. It's, do you procrastinate for fear of doing the wrong things or putting stuff off? And we're going to talk about perfectionism today as well, and how you can overcome that. But definitely procrastination is something that, people that feel like they're imposters always struggle with as well. And sensitive or overly sensitive to constructive criticism, as you see it as failing. And I know personally, I like those words of affirmation. I like to sometimes be told that I'm doing a good job, or I like to be told that, things are going okay. And I constantly need that affirmation via words. And sometimes in the past, I've definitely been overly sensitive to constructive criticism, as you've seen it as something that you've done, or you're trying to please others, and it's something that you've maybe felt like you've let people down, and it can definitely weigh on your mind as well. But I know I'm going through this quite quick, guys, but we have sort of got action steps that you can take, and I really want to get to the meat of this webinar session today. But in terms of causes of imposter syndrome, I think there's a lot. And again, we're kind of generalizing here. And like I said, when I spoke to Lauren Callahan, our head of psychology, she kind of agreed as well. I think, a lot of it does come down to that conditioning and upbringing as well sometimes, and there was something that I was once taught by a coach of mine, and he said, we're all victims of victims. And that really stood with me, because it's almost like we're always conditioned by our parents, and they're conditioned by their parents, and their parents are conditioned by their parents, and it passes down. And that conditioning can, of course, lead us to feel certain ways or react in certain ways, and, experience and see life in different ways as well. So definitely conditioning and upbringing plays a massive part. And as well, starting a new job, fear of failure, being caught out by your new colleagues, starting university or school, not feeling like you belong or fit in with others in your classes. On that, Zoe, starting a new job in your career and your experience, and being within HR, it might not have been yourself, but have you seen this been a big issue amongst employees, that they fear that when they're starting a new job, they don't fit in, or they might not be able to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you're going into possibly, a different sector, a different type of organization, or, unless you keep on going into the same sector and the same size, for example, of organization where, the infrastructure is very, very similar, unless you're doing that. And even then it's change, isn't it? So that change in itself is a source of anxiety. And I think if you're going in and you're starting a new position, you've got new colleagues, you've got new processes, new systems, new ways of working, new environment, everything is different. And so I think it would be strange if we didn't feel a sense of sort of anxiousness, or a feeling that perhaps we're not going to know everything, we're not going to be able to do everything as well as we used to, because that rhythm and routine that you get in with your existing employer, you know what you need to do, you know what's expected, and it's almost like a fear of the unknown, really, because you don't know what you're walking into. And I think that's why it's so important that when you are inducted into a new company, that all of those fears are sort of tried to be addressed, really, because I think otherwise it just adds to those thoughts in your head that you're not going to know everything, you're perhaps going to make a mistake, or you're not going to live up to expectations, or you are going to be a fraud, and you're going to be found out. So I think I've seen that repeatedly over the years, and particularly where employees have joined companies where it's totally different. I think that just magnifies those feelings that you perhaps already had, definitely.
Yeah, and like you said, it's really important for employers to really diminish those fears and those challenges early on as well, and really kind of show a human side again, I guess. Because just from seeing everyone's yeses in the comment section, this is something that a lot of us experience, and when you feel like that imposter within a company, you feel like you're the only one as well, right? You feel like you're the only one experiencing that. So it's really important to have these open conversations as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So we really wanted to highlight the different types of imposter syndrome and how to manage them as well. And I think it always comes back to how our ethos here at Everymind at Work, which is mental health is so individual, and there really is no one size fits all approach that anyone can take. So we have to kind of look at the different types of imposter syndrome, and also what actions you can take to try and address it and try to manage it as well. So when we go through these, you might see some commonalities behind, how you face work or whatever it is outside of work. And just let us know, again, if you want to use the chat box to share any of your thoughts on any of these points, feel free to do so as well. So if we start with the perfectionist, and apologies for the slides, I don't know why it's done that. The perfectionist focuses on how something gets done. So in terms of the perfectionist, they often experience chronic worry and self-doubt, which stems from setting unrealistic goals, which may never be reached. These individuals are sometimes described as control freaks. They crave accuracy and 100% perfection on everything that they do. And they often feel it'd be better to do the tasks themselves as opposed to delegating it. Now, I thought I would lead with perfectionist because that is me. And yeah, Lindsay, you're spot on. You could tell that I was a perfectionist. The first thing that I said was the slides messed up, right? And I did these slides today. So perfectionist, I that is something that's held me personally back for a long time in my business career. And in anything in general. And, in terms of when I started to have people within my team, one of the things that I had to really address was my perfectionism, because I think as that last point was stating, sometimes I feel like, God, I'll just do it. I'll do that. I'll do that because I want this to be a certain level. And me stepping back and addressing that perfectionism has really helped me manage and lead as well, because, it's stepping back and allowing other people to do it in their own ways, and not feeling like I have to control every element of the business and every element of the team. And even definitely stuff like, just creating content and sharing stuff on social media. It took me a long time to start sharing videos on social media about mental health, because, everything had to be perfect. The lighting, my hair, the shirt that I was wearing and everything. So, I got called out on a couple of occasions and said, you're trying to tell your story, you're trying to help other people, but your ego is letting you not, because you're too worried about how you look and all of that. And they called me out, and it made sense. So definitely I've had to learn over the last couple of years to drop my perfectionism. Zoe, would you say you're a perfectionist?
God, yeah. I mean, we've talked about this, Paul, haven't we? And I struggle with it, and I'd be the first to admit that I struggle with it, and I probably am a bit of a control freak. But I think in response to what you've just said, I think I think the way you've dealt with it over the years, and now your I guess your viewpoint of it I suppose helps other perfectionists, because if I mean, we've talked, haven't we, and I've gone, oh gosh, there's a spelling mistake in there, and you've been more chilled about it, and I've been, oh my goodness, like the world is about to end because we put a post on social media and it had one tiny mistake. But my perfectionist sort of trait almost like zoom in on that, and I think we talked, didn't we, about as well, because of the roles that I've carried out, and we are used to perhaps checking contracts, or checking perhaps a disciplinary letter or a settlement agreement, or making sure that that's legally perfect. So I think naturally as HR professionals, we're used to dealing with things having to be right, and knowing that if they're not right, perhaps a lawyer or an employee or somebody else will pick us up on that. So I think that's probably why I've got the traits I have, and that I've had to work really hard at sort of pulling back from that. And people often say to me, just go with the 80-20 rule, and I shudder when I hear that, because I struggle to do it. I still struggle to do it, and I have to really, really try. But there's something sort of innate in me that sort of equates mistakes with almost like failing, and oh my god, somebody's gonna think you're the worst person ever because of this mistake, which is totally blowing it out of proportion and totally an unreasonable thought. But I think you battle in your head with those thoughts if you have these types of traits, definitely. So yeah, it's a tough one. It's a discipline to really, really question yourself on it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like you said, it's definitely a process. I've got better over the years, but even yesterday I was doing a graphic, and I was showing someone how to do the graphic, and I must have spent about 2 minutes just making sure the logo was in the center, like making sure that it was dead in the center. And then even they said, why did you spend so long? Like, it looked fine.
Yeah.
So I constantly check myself and watch myself. But I think I've learned a lot about perfectionism from a recent client that I was doing a lot of work with. He was someone who just did not micromanage me. He did not worry. He had certain stuff that he wanted in place, but he was very much, free. You go and do what you want, and I trust you in that. And that's something that I've learned from and tried to adopt as well. With everyone in the team is very much, go and sort of make this role your own, and try not to micromanage. I'm going to come back to some of the comments in a second, but I think in terms of the action steps that we come up with is trying to celebrate achievements and don't focus on that could have been better. Like those small wins, like you always kind of remind yourself of maybe that one negative response to an email that you wrote about 10 times and then rewrote and then didn't send and then send, and then it come back and it was a negative response. We always dwell on that rather than the probably 10, 20, 30, 40 emails that we get that are positive every week. So it's kind of celebrating those small achievements. It's when we complete tasks, and it's remembering that it doesn't have to be 100% perfect, that taking action is the most important step here. It's viewing any mistakes as learning opportunities, which I think this is going to probably play a part in all of these different personality types that we're going to be talking about. But it's also pushing yourself to start tasks and accepting there'll never be a perfect time and a perfect outcome. And I think it's like you said, perfectionism stops us from taking action. And there's definitely sometimes it's there's excuses around perfectionism of why we can't start this job or start this task or do this, and it definitely holds us back. So as soon as we can address it, the more important. Corey says delegation is a great way to add value to people's jobs and roles day to day, but also free up your own capacity. 100% Corey. And Emma says, I'm a control freak. I've had to learn to step back and appreciate that others deal with things differently. It's really hard and I still struggle. It's hard to lower your expectations. Yeah, definitely. And many of this could also fit in with low self-esteem. How is this different? Many people with low self-esteem feel a fraud, self-critical, and that they're not good enough to be in their role. Yeah, very, very valid point. And actually, we're going to address that as well, because as I was going through this today, I was sort of saying to myself exactly the same thing. A lot of this comes down to low self-esteem. So we're going to address that as well towards the end as well. So perfectionists, any perfectionists, just say yes. If you are a perfectionist, just want to see how many there are before we move on to the next one. Yeah, lots of yeses coming in. Okay, cool. Next one, Zoe, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so the next one is the superhero, and this is effectively measured on sort of how many roles or areas they can juggle all at the same time, but then still really excel in them. So they're sort of convinced that they're a fake and they're not worthy of their position. So they push themselves even harder to almost prove that they're worthy of being there, and that in turn can turn into sort of like workaholic type behaviours. So it can cause sort of wider problems around sort of relationships or your home life. It means that you sometimes think that, you need to be first in the office or first to log on in the morning, and then last out at night, or working late at night because you've almost got something to prove. And I think it's that sort of the feeling that it's never enough, and your job and the job that you've got, doing well in that is not enough, and actually you need to sort of like overcompensate and think that you can juggle lots and lots of different things. Sometimes it's a perception that downtime is wasteful, so sort of taking that time to have self-care, have that downtime. So sometimes you often feel as though you should be working, you should be doing something else, and actually you're not being productive if you're taking that downtime, which obviously isn't the case. But and I think, as Paul said at the start, a lot of these will overlap. It may be, I mean, I know I can sort of see myself in three different of these types, and some of the things, some of the actions will overlap, and some of the behaviours and the things that you see will overlap. But I think the predominant focus here is trying to do more, trying to juggle more, trying to prove that you can excel in even more than just your core role. So in terms of those action steps, I think it's often a byproduct of working long hours, being sort of excessive at the weekends or whatever, that your hobbies and passions tend to fall by the wayside or become second best because you're not seeing them as a priority. The same with the perception that downtime is wasteful. You might think that actually if you go for a run or, do a yoga class or whatever it might be, or even just sit and read a book, you might think of that as being wasteful because you're not doing something more productive, when actually that self-care is just as important. And it's also about learning that sort of external validation shouldn't be consuming your thoughts. So Paul mentioned at the start about that affirmation, which, I think to some degree we all crave that, don't we? Everybody likes being told that they've done a good job, or that piece of work was really great, or it was really helpful. But I think when that consumes your thoughts, that actually you're not enough and you need that constant validation, or, I guess I sort of describe it as people pleasing. I think a lot of these traits can manifest themselves in a people pleasing type behavior, that you think, well, if everybody's not happy with me and think that I'm doing a great job, then I'm obviously not doing a great job, when clearly that isn't the case. But that people pleasing in itself can create anxiety and more sort of worries. And then on point 3, that constructive criticism, you can then take it personally. So constructive criticism is meant to be a positive, but if you're not in the right frame of mind to accept that, and they say feedback is a gift, don't they? And you don't have to accept it, and you take from it those elements that you feel that you need to work on. But I think if you're in that mindset that everything you do is wrong and you're not good enough, sometimes that criticism can really be taken personally. So I think the fourth point about that positive self-talk and that positive internal validation in itself helps you build that confidence. I mean, I often try and say to myself, what evidence have I got? What evidence can I see, can I hear, to almost like validate those negative thoughts that I'm having? And often, being more positive in your thinking can talk yourself out of that. And I think there's a lot to be said for almost like internally thinking that you're good enough, and reminding yourself that you don't need that sort of affirmation, and you don't need that validation from everybody else, that you're good enough, and you having the thoughts that you're good enough is enough, or should be enough. But yeah. It's a tough one.
Yeah, and I think on that note, Samantha said, "You are enough" is a daily mantra I'm trying to remember. The need for external validation is high, but I'm working on it. Um, yeah, so
Yeah.
definitely, I think as you say, that superhero sometimes is doing a lot to keep themselves busy, and I can relate to this as well. And I can also relate to I think my dad was that superhero trait as well, with someone who everyone relied on my dad. My dad was always busy, and I think that busyness was my dad's way of almost distracting himself from the internal issues that obviously he was experiencing when he was. So it's definitely something I can relate to. And I think Emma's made a really good point as well. She says, I feel like people can take you for granted if you are a superhero. Oh, Emma will do it.
Yeah.
And you're kind of almost relied on in a way. And how many times have we heard, I'll go, HR will be able to deal with that, or go and speak to your manager. They'll be able to deal with that. And everything's always passed on to the superhero. So I definitely think that's a trait that a lot of people face when it comes to being an imposter syndrome as well. My perfectionism's kicking in as well. The natural genius has gone to the second line.
I can confirm that the slides were perfect.
They were great, weren't they?
I don't know what's happened.
They were great. They were perfect. There's an even width on the edge of it as well. But yeah, the natural genius, they care about how and when accomplishments happen. So typically, if they spend a lot of time on a task and it takes them longer to achieve something, it's the worst that they feel. I can definitely relate to that as well. Delia, yeah, we'll send you a copy of the slides. I'll give you my email afterwards and I can send that over to you. I always used to be obsessed with these 6-week challenges, right? I have to get this in 6 weeks. I have to, do this within 12 weeks. And it was always within this short period of time, because if I said to myself, I want to get a 6-pack in the next 3 years, I had to get it done very, very quickly. And I had to, over excel in being able to do that. It's setting high targets. It's expecting everything to be completed quickly and accurately as well the first time round. And it's having an expectation that natural ability will continue, and asking for help is a weakness. I think that's a really important part with this one. If you are that kind of natural genius in a way, and you want everything to be done to a high standard and to be done quickly, asking for help is very, very difficult. And I think the action steps that we've put here is, again, reframing your thinking, using affirmations or different mantras that obviously you can use to see yourself as a work in progress, and knowing that not everything's going to be done to such a high standard. It's knowing that learning and growing is a natural part of life, and succeeding quickly at everything first time round is unrealistic. It's facing new challenges positively, and at the same time, it's not avoiding certain aspects because you don't believe that you're going to be able to achieve them and you believe you're going to fail. I think the natural genius, Zoe, is definitely someone that maybe at school had always achieved well, or there was a pressure for them to achieve well.
Straight A's.
And I think that has, it has an impact, because then when you carry that into work, or maybe you was really good at sport, every sport, and you was always told you was very good, when you carry that into the workplace, it can be a challenge as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Would you say that you can relate to that?
Yeah, I think it ties in as well to your upbringing, doesn't it? And I can totally see how your upbringing can sort of shape different types. I mean, you may have had a really supportive family, but that family may have had high expectations. I mean, you hear the phrase about, like soccer mums and things like that, don't you? Or people, I think there's even documentaries about it, like dance mums and soccer mums and whatever. People are really pushing their kids, and almost it's them, because it makes them feel good, and they're pushing and pushing and pushing, and actually a lot of it's for their own self-worth, and to say, look at my daughter, what she's done, or whatever it might be. And I think that in itself can shape different feelings, different possible anxieties, because you think you're not going to live up to that expectation. And it can almost be as worse as maybe having family that aren't interested. I mean, so I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that that's a positive, that's not a positive, but it potentially shapes a different type of imposter syndrome, depending on whether they're, overly supportive, which could be seen as pushy as well, or whether they're not interested and they just leave you to it, but maybe you've not got the support element there. So it can foster very, very different behaviours, I think, as you're growing up. And you're conditioned then, aren't you, to thinking a certain way from what you've seen and heard as you're growing up.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think expectations are something that we've spoken about on previous webinars, and
Mm,
expectations has been a challenge that a lot of people had during this lockdown stage, and I think you can look
yeah.
at it in a couple of ways. Expectations from your employer, expectations from your manager, like what are
Mm,
they expecting of you? And then the
yeah.
second one is expectations of yourself, right? So now I'm working from home. I've got more time, so I need to be able to do more work. I'm not going to be distracted. I've got to be highly productive, and all of a sudden as well, you're also saying, "Oh, my boss is really expecting more of me, so I've got to put more
Yeah.
work in."
Yeah.
I've definitely struggled with that expectations point myself, of always feeling like other people expect more of me, and then when you have an open conversation with them, they're like, "No, no, no, you're doing fine. Like, keep doing what you're doing." So
Yeah.
it's definitely something to address.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I like Lindsay says, loving the descriptive names and feeling positive, and you have just described me to a T. I am a
You're a
genius.
genius.
You
Yeah.
are a genius, Lindsay. We're all geniuses in our own way, right?
Yeah.
The fourth one,
So,
Zoe, can you take this one?
yeah. So the soloist. So this sort of type sort of cares mostly about who completes the task, and it's sort of the perception that asking for help is seen as a weakness. If you ask for help, then that means that you're a fraud. You don't necessarily know what you're doing, and you're almost like revealing, your true self to be fraudulent, and that you shouldn't actually be there. And it's often a feeling of you having to achieve alone. It might have been a task, or it might have been a project, or whatever it might be. This feeling that if you ask for help, other people will think, oh well, actually she doesn't know what she's doing. She can't do this on her own. And it also can manifest in potentially deflecting away from themselves. So say for example, you're on a project or a piece of work. A tendency to not say, I need help here, I'm really struggling with this, I could really use some help. You would perhaps phrase it as, the project needs, or such and such a body needs, and not really opening yourself up and being candid about who needs the help here, because there's a perception that if it's you personally that needs the help, then that could be a failure, that could be seen as a weakness on your part. So I think knowing that you've got a support network there, and feeling confident, and feeling that you can trust that support network, and that it's an open and safe environment to actually ask for help. And I think if you've got that type of culture where, asking for help isn't seen as a weakness, and that people will be supportive, and the more that you do that, the more it reinforces those messages. I think refraining from comparing yourself to others as well. I mean, again, this type of trait probably overlaps into the various types, but I think we're terrible, aren't we, at comparing ourselves to others. I think that's most sort of prevalent as well when you look at social media. I personally have a bit of a love-hate relationship with social media. I think there are real positives, but it's sometimes you can either compare yourself to others and you think, gosh, that person's got a perfect life, and it probably is the case that they haven't, but that's what they're portraying on social media. And equally, if you're not portraying your true self on there, that in itself can sort of eat away at you and be damaging your own self-worth. So I think building that sort of internal positive self-talk and building your own self-awareness has got to be the first step. And then, clearly portraying a more, true image of yourself on social media is a good tip, and won't sort of make you feel, less worthy, or as though somebody else has got a fabulous life and you haven't. So I think you have to start with yourself before you even look at the issues with perhaps comparing yourself to others. But I think the key here is that you don't have to achieve alone. I mean, in life, very, very few things, you're doing 100% on your own. I mean, most of it involves some element of input from other people, or teamwork, or, everybody has their own strengths. Everybody has their own things that they bring to the table. And that's to be said for any team or piece of work or project, whatever it might be. Even in a family situation, you'll have people that are better at dealing with things, or have experiences that perhaps you haven't got. So just using that network, but be it a family or friends network, be it a work network of colleagues, it is just so important. And you know, I would suggest that very, very few things are completely standalone. And I don't think there's any expectation that you should succeed 100% on your own, because I don't think that's a realistic expectation either. So I think the crux of it is asking for help, isn't it? And making sure that you have supportive people around you, definitely.
Yeah, and again, I'm reading some of the comments that are coming in, and there's lots of people agreeing, and also at the same time making some really valid points as well. If I just start with Kelly, Kelly says she can see elements of all four in herself, and over the years she's improved in some of those areas. Still not there by any means, but good to know I'm progressing slowly. And I think that, Kelly, is one of the most important things of this whole session, because number one, it's good that loads of people on this session can relate, because then it makes us feel like we're not the only ones feeling this way, right? But secondly, it's knowing that it is that journey. There's no like light bulb moment that all of a sudden we're not going to become a perfectionist anymore, or, you know, we're not going to struggle to ask for help. But it is that process and that self-awareness of, this is me and I need to try and do something about it. And it's definitely going to take some time. Corey made a really good point, and I'll share my thoughts on this, and Zoe, feel free to chime in. But he says, can definitely resonate with the soloist. I often struggle to reach out for help, and in my role, I feel I should know everything and have all the answers, which I know isn't possible or realistic. I do wonder if this is quite a male trait, e.g. men less likely to go to a GP, etc. I think, you know, asking for help is definitely bordering into vulnerability, right? You know, and as a man, I knew personally that when I was dealing with what I was dealing with, depression, anxiety, struggling to deal with obviously the grief around my dad's suicide, you know, I didn't talk to anyone about it, and I bottled it up and I kept it to myself, and I tried to deal with it on my own. Now, I did have that support network, people reaching out and saying, hey, you know, talk to us if you want. But I think, as you said, it's, if I do talk to someone about it, I'm making myself vulnerable, and that wasn't comfortable for me at the time. So I think definitely as a soloist or someone that fears reaching out to people, it is that embracing vulnerability in a way, and knowing that being vulnerable doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you, you know, someone who can't handle the pressures or handle your job. And I think definitely as a HR professional and a business leader or a line manager, we do get scared of vulnerability, because if I'm vulnerable, then maybe you're judging my performance. You're judging me as someone who can handle the work that I've got, right? So definitely, I think people can relate to that, Corey, as well.
And I think just to put a bit of an HR slant on it, and I know we've got lots of sort of you know, HR generalists on the call. I think by virtue of the nature of our role, i.e., you know, generalist, I think, you know, we do have to wear, you know, hundreds of different hats. And I think I felt over the years, because I've always been a generalist, I've never specialized. And although I have, you know, certain elements that I enjoy, or I think perhaps I'm slightly better at than others, you know, I've always been a generalist. But I think we are expected to have the answer to, you know, anything remotely people related. And I think particularly, again, if you're in a smaller organization that perhaps hasn't got the different subject matter departments, obviously even a bigger organization, you know, you might have a talent acquisition department, you might have a comms department, and so you wouldn't necessarily be expected to have the depth of knowledge perhaps if you were in a smaller company. But I think just by nature of it being such a wide reaching role, you think that you need to know the answers to everything, and you think that when a line manager comes to you with a problem, that you have to know the answer. And sometimes it is difficult to sort of think, oh gosh, I don't know that, I'm going to have to go away and look into it. And that in itself can almost like you can beat yourself up about it, because you think, gosh, well, I'm the HR person, I must know this. But I think it's important to remember that, you know, because HR covers so many different topics, you know, we are not going to have all the answers to everything all the time. It's just not possible. And it's almost like, you know, to give ourselves a bit of a break and know that, you know, that we're doing the best we can with the knowledge that we have, but we are not going to be an expert in every single subject area of HR, because that would be pretty impossible. Yeah.
I think I was just thinking then I might share this on LinkedIn. I don't know whether I've seen it somewhere else, but I was like, the three words that are hardest to say is not "I love you," it's "I don't know," right? Sometimes like I don't know is the hardest thing ever. Like, you know, even
Yeah.
I had to get used to it. I had to drop my ego because I share from personal experience. And when I was going into companies and doing talks about mental health, and someone might say, "Hey, you know, I'm really struggling with this. What would you advise?" You know, it's dangerous for me to start trying to answer that
Mm,
isn't something based on my personal experience. So I had to learn to drop that ego and just say, I don't
mm,
know. But at the same time, you know, afterwards, if you come up, I can show you a couple of resources within that area, signpost you to some professionals that might be able to help.
mm.
And that still didn't sit right with me, just to stand there in
Yeah.
front of everyone and go, I don't know the answer to that. But I think it's so important that we are able to be able to say those three words
Yeah.
instead of "I love you," right? The fifth one is the expert. So it's good, right? Everyone wants to be an imposter syndrome now because we're going to be geniuses and experts and perfect and all of this. But that's of course the downfall to this as well. But the expert is the knowledge version of the perfectionist. It's looking at obviously what and how much knowledge that they have. It's also as well the belief that more knowledge equals to more competence. So again, you never stop learning. So I always sometimes talk about the self-improvement trap, that sometimes you can learn and learn and learn and learn and learn, and you're always learning. And at the same time, you're not taking action on those learnings. So you're not actually
Yeah.
applying it. You know, I look at my dad. My dad meditated. My dad did Reiki. My dad did yoga. My dad ran every day. My dad read some of the most, you know, valuable self-help books that I've ever read as well. But at the same time, I think what my dad got into was that trap of learning and learning, but not taking
Mm,
action on it. And again, you know, I've definitely fallen into that trap myself. And often they'll actively seek additional training or qualifications to satisfy this need to be the expert as well. And in terms of the action steps, again, everything kind of crosses over, as we've said, but try to base any new learning on actual requirements as opposed to just in case this happens. So what is it that you want to learn and you want to take action on? I think sometimes with self-help books, I always kind of say now, don't read it from cover to cover. Maybe
mm,
read 10 pages. And then once you've read those 10 pages, do something about those 10 pages before you move on to the rest as well. It's seeking out new information, which can obviously turn into procrastination sometimes as well. So, you know, in
yeah.
marketing, I always call it the shiny object syndrome. You know, you do if you want to start a business, if you want to do something, you look at one way of doing it and you start doing it, and then you Google a better way of doing it, and then that distracts
Mm,
you over here, and then distracts you over here, and it's that shiny object syndrome of there's always a better way of doing it,
mm,
and then you never get anything done, right? It's again asking for help and using your support network, seeking mentors, bringing these thoughts into perspective and challenging any negativity. And mentoring or coaching a more junior colleague can help you both, as it can reinforce your knowledge and experience. So I think that's really key as well. You know, yes, getting a mentor for yourself, but at the same time being open to mentoring others, and that can really, really help drive this forward as well. So in terms of being the expert, Zoe, again, I'm guessing with HR professionals and, you know, especially within the corporate environment, you know, you want to be that expert. You want to be seen as that expert as well.
Yeah, definitely, and I can totally resonate with the sort of seeking out more information, and that, and it's in itself can turn into procrastination. So, I mean, I personally like employment law, but you could go on and on and on, couldn't you? And sometimes, you know, if I had like a sticky case or whatever, and I would research and research and research and maybe talk to a lawyer and say, this is what I'm thinking, or and sometimes if it's really complicated, you know, you're not going to get a black and white answer. And I would tend to, you know, I would tend to sort of dig and dig and dig and dig and dig to try and satisfy the need for knowing absolutely everything about whatever the scenario was, and that in itself is not healthy. It can lead to procrastination, and it can also lead to being fearful of trying. So you sort of think, gosh, this is so important, but I still don't think I know enough about it, so I'm not going to jump in, you know, just yet. And it's this sort of trying, isn't it? And it's so linked into coaching and, you know, having that sort of growth mindset, not seeing sort of reframing it as being a positive, not as being a failure. But you know, all those things are disciplines, aren't they, that we have to practice, and they don't come naturally, and that's why I think, none of this is a silver bullet, is it? It's things that you have to practice, and you have to tell yourself on a regular basis that there is another way, and have that positive affirmation, definitely.
Yeah, and again, like hopefully these tips, guys, like I say, there's something you can take away and start working on. And again, I think the key thing with learnings is having that self-awareness first, of being able to feel understood of this is me, and then what can I do about it. So guys, just put in the chat box. I'm just going to quickly come back. Oh, my perfectionism's kicking in again. What would you say is the most related to you? So would you say you're the perfectionist? Would you say you're the superhero, the natural genius, the soloist, or the expert? I mean, if there's a couple, again, feel free to share them. But what would you say that resonates with you the most? Corey says the soloist. Samantha says the perfectionist, the superhero. Delia says the soloist. Vicky says 50-50, the perfectionist and the expert. Corey says a bit of perfectionist. Kelly says perfectionist and soloist. Emma says probably a mix of all. Gillian says the perfectionist. Samantha says the perfectionist. Yeah. So there's definitely, as you can kind of see here, we're not alone here, guys. There's so many people feeling the same way. Joe says a perfectionist and expert. Lindsay says we're all a bit of a superhero. We have a perfectionist, a natural genius, and an expert. Taylor, natural genius. George, probably perfectionist. Catherine says a mix of all. Laura says a mix of all. Kate says traits in all. Andy says a mix of all. Yeah, it's good stuff. So definitely, what would you say, Zoe, is your most dominant one?
The dominant one is definitely perfectionist, but I think I've got traits of expert and superhero, definitely. But I think if I had to pick one, it'd be perfectionist. Yeah, I don't think I'm not frightened of asking for help, so I don't think soloist really applies. But yeah, you could take bits from all of them, but definitely the dominant one is perfectionist, probably, and driving everyone mad.
Yeah. And it's like you say, it's definitely a journey. I think, like, as you said, you're okay asking for help now, but I'm sure at one point you wasn't, the same with me, same with everyone. So I think it's definitely that process that we go through. And like a lot of people said, there's definitely a mix of all as well. So just finally, I'm going to go through these really, really quickly. And like I said, I'm happy to send you these slides, guys. I'm just going to put my email here. If you drop me an email, paul@everymind@work.com. Talking and typing. Who says men can't multitask, right? Paul@everymind@work.com. If you drop me an email, I'm happy to send you these slides. There should be a replay that goes out as well. But in terms of wellbeing tips as well, just to kind of obviously, summarize something that you can take away, it's building your self-awareness and acknowledging your own feelings. So, not being afraid of saying I'm a perfectionist, but having that self-awareness, I think, is the key part. Is when you know that, it's how can I manage that, and how can I deal with that? It's understanding your real strengths and areas for development and to support your actions. Definitely for me, like being a perfectionist is definitely held me back, but at the same time, it's been very impactful and in a positive way as well in a lot of cases. So I think it's using this to our own strength. Reframing failure as experimentation and growing, nurturing your support system and talking more openly about your feelings is extremely common, particularly in women, so you're not alone. Definitely making sure that support system's in place. Keep an achievement journal linked to acknowledging your feelings and being grateful. We've spoken about journaling before. It's definitely a good tool to use. Developing a quick response plan, so i.e. negative self-talk, for example, whereas my evidence. So I think that's key as well. Almost, we've spoken about the need to plan. Having that kind of quick response plan is helpful as well. Trying to overcome perfectionism by setting more realistic goals, obtaining feedback on their suitability. I think perfectionism for me, what helped was just taking action, breaking those comfort zones, doing it more than once, letting it go, and then you can it helps in a way once you've done that. Celebrating your successes and owning those achievements. You did it and no one else. I think that's massively helpful. Music really helps me with that. I don't know if you've ever done this before, anyone has, but like when you've had a small achievement, I sometimes play music and celebrate it. The wife walks in and goes, "What are you doing? Why are you listening to that song again?" But it's definitely like celebrating our own wins. If we're someone who isn't very confident, we haven't got high self-belief, we just naturally won't do it. Like, as you say, you've done something that's been good, but you'll typically push that onto someone else. you won't really feel that positivity. So I think we have to force ourselves sometimes to celebrate our successes. Number 9 is don't generalize the situation. I couldn't do this thing, so I must be rubbish at everything I do. And being careful on social media, limiting usage and ensuring it's not creating a more harmful self-image. So comparing yourself to the highlight reel that, of course, we all see on social media as well. So like I said, hopefully those tips help. Just before we wrap up, and take any questions that you might have, someone made a really good point. I think it was Chris, about obviously self-belief. Now, I believe self-belief has a massive part in all of this. If we believe in ourselves, then of course, feeling like an imposter almost gets eliminated slightly a little bit as well. And one thing that obviously what we're doing within Everymind at work is really focusing on that self-belief part of it as well. Zoe, I'm going to jump off webcam. If you don't mind jumping off webcam as well, because I'm just cautious of the internet. What I'm going to quickly do, guys, less than a minute for me to do this. I'm going to quickly share my phone. So obviously this is very much down to technology. So guys, let me know if you can see my phone. You should see it now. Okay, good stuff. So within the Everymind work app that obviously we're providing businesses and their employees. Also, it's free for 6 months, a trial at the moment if you want to take it on. One thing that we're actually really focusing on is, of course, self-esteem. So employees can come in at any time. And if you want to have this access to this app as well, should have turned on Do Not Disturb, feel free to let us know as well, and we'll be able to potentially set you up a trial for it. But again, really kind of focusing on self-esteem through articles, through building self-confidence, through images. And at the same time, we've obviously got videos being added. But one thing that I really wanted to highlight just quickly is a feature called your Everymind scores. So like I said, I think it's really important to have that self-awareness, to know where you are and where you are at. But then the main thing is how can I then support that? How can I then improve that? And we're focused on the 6 pillars of positive mental health. And of course, one of them is self-belief. And all we do is ask a series of questions, just 10 questions around self-belief and how much we value ourselves. I'm just going to quickly answer some of these questions. And then based upon these answers, obviously the algorithm that we have will kick in and allow you to see a baseline score of where you are when it comes to self-belief. So in this instance, from me answering those questions quickly, I've got room to grow. It tells me a little bit more about, what I need to do. I can obviously say I agree or disagree to that score. But the main thing here is, here's my score in self-belief, but here's now some suggestions. So really in terms of self-belief, what can I do to improve that? And we're always tailoring it to the individual on the answers that they're given, and at the same time improving the content that's there. So I definitely think if we come back to that, it's improving self-belief and trying to help you and your employees manage and monitor that side of it. I think is vitally, vitally important. So I'm going to jump back on webcam. Feel free to as well. Zoe. So guys, if you want to find out a little bit more about that, I'm just going to put it up here. All you need to do is come in to everymindatwork.com/inquire. There's going to be some more information there about it, and the free 6-month trial that actually ends in August 31st. So at the end of August, sorry. So if you do want to find out a little bit more about that and get you set up to trial it within your HR team or enroll it into all of your employees, then please head over to that link and sign up now to test out that product. But yeah, I completely agree. Self-belief has a massive part in all of this. From me and Zoe, thank you guys so much for joining. Like I said, if you do want to copy the slides, do email me, paul@everymindatwork.com, and I'll be able to send them to you. You should get a replay of this webinar. If not, we'll be putting it up on YouTube and on our podcast as well if you want to listen back in your own time. But thank you so much for joining, and hopefully we'll see you next week, as always, every Wednesday at 1 p.m.
Thanks,
all right, Zoe,
guys.
thanks so much.
Take care.
Thank you, guys. Bye. Bye.